The air in Veronica Anderson's corner office on the 45th floor was thin and tasted of money. From her throne of Italian leather, she looked down on Atlanta, a sprawling map of her ambition. The cars below were ants, the people insignificant specks, all scrambling in a world she was determined to conquer. For Veronica, a black woman who had clawed her way to a directorship at a prestigious insurance firm, this view wasn't just a perk, it was a validation. It was armor. Every pane of glass, every inch of polished chrome was a shield against the world she'd fought to leave behind. A world of subtle slights, of being twice as good for half the credit, of the condescending smiles from her white colleagues who saw her success as a curious anomaly, a corporate diversity initiative made flesh. She was tired of being an anomaly. She wanted to be the rule. Her life with Samuel Anderson felt like it belonged to a different city, a different world, far below her perch. Sam was a good man. That, she had come to realize, was the fundamental problem. He was a history teacher at a public high school in a less affluent part of town, a man who found profound joy in the simple, predictable rhythms of his life. He saw the world in terms of community, connection, and the quiet dignity of a job well done. He loved their modest but well-kept home in a quiet, tree-lined suburb. He loved the smell of coffee on a Saturday morning and the sound of jazz on their old record player. He loved her, with a devotion so pure and unwavering, it felt less like a comfort and more like a cage. His love was a warm, hand-knitted sweater, but Veronica yearned for the cold, hard feel of diamonds against her skin. Their worlds collided every evening at 6:30 p.m. He would greet her at the door, his face lit with genuine delight, smelling faintly of chalk dust and cheap school coffee. He'd ask about her day, and she would offer a curated, edited version, leaving out the gnawing hunger for more, the bitter taste of a passed-over promotion, the secret thrill of a text message from a man who understood that hunger. That man was Preston Davenport. Preston didn't talk about community. He talked about acquisitions. He didn't offer warm hugs. He offered weekend trips to Napa on a private jet. He was a wealthy white investment broker who saw Veronica not as a success story to be patronized, but as a fellow predator. He saw the fire in her, the same fire that burned in him, and he promised her a world where that fire wouldn't just be tolerated, but celebrated. A world without limits. A world without Sam. The gilded cage tightened its bars one Tuesday evening. Sam was in the kitchen, humming an old Motown tune while making his signature jambalaya, a recipe passed down from his Louisiana-born mother. A courier delivered a flat, heavy box. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was a Patek Philippe watch. It was a masterpiece of Swiss engineering, its gold case gleaming under the kitchen lights. It was absurdly, obscenely expensive. "Wow," Sam breathed, his eyes wide. "Ronnie, what is this?" Veronica breezed in from the living room, a practiced, casual smile on her face. "Oh, that. It's the annual performance bonus award. They give them to the top directors. Silly, isn't it? But it's policy." "Policy? To give out a watch that costs more than my car?" Sam asked, a hint of unease in his voice. He wasn't greedy, but he wasn't naive. The sheer extravagance felt wrong, out of place in their life. "Prestige, honey. It's all about image at that level," she said, waving a dismissive hand as she opened the refrigerator. "You wouldn't understand the corporate world." The subtle barb landed as intended. It put a little space between them, a reminder of their different orbits. Sam, wanting to believe her, nodded slowly and put the watch back in its box. He loved her, and he trusted her. But later that night, while looking for a receipt for a home repair in the shared home office, his hand brushed against a stack of mail Veronica had tucked away. On top was a bank statement from a high-yield savings account he'd never seen before. It wasn't a joint account. It was in her name only. He scanned the transactions, his heart beginning to thud a slow, heavy rhythm against his ribs. He saw large, regular deposits from her paycheck, far more than she'd ever let on. And then he saw it. A single, massive withdrawal from 2 weeks ago. The exact price of a Patek Philippe watch, paid to a luxury jeweler downtown. It wasn't a corporate bonus. It was a purchase. A secret, lavish purchase from a secret account. The beautiful, expensive gift wasn't a reward from her company. It was a lie, sitting in its velvet box like a ticking bomb. The MS Caribbean Dream was a floating city of indulgence, a monument to escapism that sliced through the impossibly blue waters of the Florida Straits. For Sam, it was paradise. He stood on their private balcony, the warm sea breeze on his face, a genuine, unadulterated smile stretching from ear to ear. He looked back into their suite, a surprise upgrade Veronica had insisted on, to celebrate us, and saw his wife. She was beautiful, framed by the doorway, a vision in a white sundress. But her smile didn't reach her eyes. Her attention was, as it so often was lately, captive to the glowing screen of her phone. "Isn't this incredible, Ronnie?" he said, his voice full of the wonder she seemed incapable of sharing. 7 days of this, just you and me. No work, no stress. "It's amazing, honey," she replied, her thumb swiping, her eyes distant. The us she had wanted to celebrate felt more fractured than ever. The lie about the watch had settled between them, an unspoken tension that Sam couldn't shake. He had decided not to confront her about the bank statement, telling himself he was overreacting, that there had to be a logical explanation. He chose to believe this cruise was her way of reconnecting, a grand gesture to prove his fears were unfounded. Yet, with every furtive glance at her phone, every polite but cool response, the seed of doubt grew, its roots digging deeper into his heart. The first 2 days were a blur of curated fun. They snorkeled in the Bahamas, drank colorful cocktails by the pool, and posed for pictures that would later populate their social media feeds with a portrait of marital bliss. Veronica played the part of the happy wife flawlessly, smiling for Sam's camera, laughing at the onboard comedian's jokes, holding his hand during their strolls on the Lido deck. But it was a performance, and Sam was becoming an unwilling critic, noticing the missed cues and the hollow delivery. He noticed how she always positioned herself slightly away from him in photos, how her laughter would cut off the second he turned his head, how she would volunteer to go back to the cabin to grab a sweater or find her sunglasses, only to return 20 minutes later, a strange nervous energy buzzing around her. The crack in their carefully constructed paradise became a chasm on the third night. They were getting ready for the formal captain's dinner. Sam was knotting his tie when he realized he'd left his wallet in the pocket of his shorts from that afternoon. He asked Veronica if she'd seen them. "I think I tossed them in the laundry bag in your closet, honey," she said, meticulously applying a final coat of dark red lipstick. Sam went to the closet and rummaged through the canvas bag. His shorts were there, but his wallet wasn't inside. He checked the side pockets again, and his fingers brushed against a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a napkin or a tissue, it was a receipt. Crisp, formal, and from a place he knew he had never been. The Serafina, an ultra-exclusive boutique hotel in a trendy Atlanta district known for its clandestine clientele. The date on the receipt was from 3 weeks ago, a Wednesday afternoon. He remembered that Wednesday clearly. He'd been grading midterm papers until late, and Veronica had texted him saying she was stuck in a marathon strategy session at work. The charge was for 2 artisan cocktails and a charcuterie for 2. The air in the lavish suite suddenly felt cold and thin. He walked back into the main room, the receipt held between his thumb and forefinger as if it were radioactive. "Veronica?" he began, his voice dangerously quiet. "What's this?" She turned from the mirror, and for a split second he saw it. Pure, unadulterated panic flashed in her eyes. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a look of mild confusion. She took the receipt, glanced at it, and let out a little laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "Oh, that! I completely forgot," she said, her voice a symphony of practiced nonchalance. "That was for my boss, Mr. Abernathy. His wife's birthday was coming up, and he's completely hopeless. I took him there to scout it out as a potential surprise party venue. We had a drink, talked logistics, that's all." The story was perfect. It was detailed. It was plausible. It even painted her as a thoughtful, indispensable employee. It was a masterpiece of deceit. Any other man might have believed her. Any other man might have felt a pang of guilt for his suspicion. But Sam had seen the secret bank statement. He had lived with the lie of the Patek Philippe watch. He knew the feel of her dishonesty now. It was a cold, smooth stone in the pit of his stomach. "Right. For your boss," he said, the words tasting like ash. He turned away and finished knotting his tie, his reflection in the mirror showing a stranger with his face. He saw a fool. Later that night, he woke up with a start. The room was dark, but the balcony door was slightly ajar, letting in the sound of the rushing waves and a sliver of moonlight. The other side of the king-size bed was empty. Sam sat up, his heart pounding. He saw Veronica's silhouette against the railing, her back to him. She was holding her phone to her ear, her body angled away as if to shield the conversation from the vast, empty ocean. He couldn't hear the words, only the hushed, intimate cadence of her whisper. It was a tone he hadn't heard her use with him in years. He lay back down, his eyes wide open in the dark, and feigned sleep. A minute later, she slipped back into the room, closing the balcony door with a soft click. She crept to the bed and froze when she saw his eyes were open. "Sam, you're awake," she whispered, a deer caught in the headlights. "Couldn't sleep," he murmured. "Who are you talking to? It's almost 2 a.m. "Oh," she said, her recovery instantaneous. "It was just my mom. You know how she worries. I was just letting her know we were having a good time." He just nodded, the lie hanging in the air between them, thick and suffocating. He knew her mother had been in bed by 9 p.m. every night of her life. He knew he wasn't on a second honeymoon. He was on a stage, an unwilling actor in a tragedy he was only just beginning to understand. The sun rose on the fourth day, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. But for Sam Anderson, the world had turned a bleak, unforgiving gray. The previous night's lie had been the final straw. The image of Veronica's silhouette on the balcony, whispering secrets to a phantom mother, was burned into his mind. He was no longer just suspicious. He was certain. The cruise was not a reconciliation. It was a charade, and he was tired of playing his part. He watched her across the breakfast table, laughing with a couple from Ohio, charming them with tales of her high-powered job in Atlanta. She was radiant, magnetic, and a complete stranger. The woman he had married, the girl he'd fallen in love with in college for her fierce intelligence and infectious laugh, was gone, replaced by this polished, cold imposter. His opportunity came after lunch. Veronica announced she was heading to the ship's spa for a deep tissue massage she'd booked weeks ago. "I'll be gone for at least 2 hours. Don't wait up," she'd said with a wink, the gesture feeling more like a dismissal than an invitation. The moment the cabin door clicked shut behind her, Sam moved. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of dread and determination. He felt like a thief in his own life, a trespasser in the intimacy he thought they shared. Her phone was on the nightstand, plugged into its charger. He picked it up, his hand trembling slightly. He expected it to be locked, to be thwarted by a passcode he didn't know. But it wasn't. It opened with a simple swipe. In her arrogance, she hadn't even bothered to protect her secrets. What he found was a systematic demolition of their 7-year marriage. It wasn't just a flirtation. It was an entire parallel life, meticulously documented in an endless scroll of text messages with a man named Preston. There were pictures. Preston and Veronica clinking champagne glasses on a rooftop bar, their heads close together. Veronica laughing in the passenger seat of a gleaming silver Aston Martin that was definitely not Preston's company car. A selfie of them in what was clearly a hotel room, tangled in white sheets, a post-coital glow on their faces. The hotel in the picture was the Serafina. The words were even more devastating than the images. Preston, counting the seconds until you're free of that dead-end life. Veronica, soon. This trip is the last act. He'll never see it coming. Preston, does he suspect anything? Veronica, him? He's too simple. He still thinks I love his jambalaya more than your stock portfolio. The cruelty of it stole Sam's breath. It wasn't just infidelity. It was contempt. She despised him. She despised his life, his values, everything he was. The love he had poured into their marriage had been received like charity, an embarrassing handout she couldn't wait to be rid of. He scrolled further back, through months, then a year, of clandestine meetings, shared dreams of a future in a Manhattan penthouse, and thinly veiled disdain for the sweet, predictable schoolteacher holding her back. The Patek Philippe watch was a pacifier to keep the baby happy. The cruise was the grand finale, a way to give him one last happy memory before she vanished from his life. When Veronica returned 2 hours later, flushed from her massage and smelling of lavender and eucalyptus, She found Sam sitting in an armchair in the middle of the room, her phone on the small table beside him. The air was heavy, electric with unspoken cataclysm. Sam, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost, she said, her smile faltering as she took in the scene. He didn't answer. He just looked at her, a long, searching gaze that stripped away her pretense, her charm, her lies. He was seeing her, truly seeing her, for the first time in a very long time. I saw your phone, he said, his voice a low, guttural sound he barely recognized as his own. The color drained from her face. The mask didn't just crack, it shattered. For a moment she was speechless, her mind racing for an escape route, a new lie, a plausible explanation. But she saw the look in his eyes, the profound, bottomless well of his pain, and knew there was no way out. The game was over. So, she changed tactics. The cornered animal doesn't apologize. It attacks. Okay, she said, her voice turning hard and brittle. So you saw it. What did you expect? Did you really think I was going to spend the rest of my life in that suffocating little house, listening to you talk about the Civil War and pretending to be happy with a teacher's salary? I want more, Sam. I deserve more. More? He choked out, the word a wound. What about us? What about our vows? For richer? For poorer? Was that all just a performance? They're just words, Sam, she shot back, her voice rising. Words everyone says because it's expected. No one chooses poorer if they have a choice. Preston can give me the life I was meant to have, a life of significance, a life you can't even begin to imagine. The pain in Sam's chest was a physical thing, a crushing weight that made it hard to breathe. The woman he loved was dismantling their shared history, brick by painful brick. He stood up, his body trembling with a mixture of grief and a cold, rising fury. So, you were just going to leave, come back from our second honeymoon and just walk out the door? That was the plan, she said, crossing her arms, defiant. I don't think so, Sam said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. A new strength, born of utter devastation, was hardening inside him. You think I'm just going to let you and your rich white boyfriend walk all over me? You think I'm just going to disappear quietly? No. I'll fight you, Veronica. I'll tell everyone, our friends, our families, your precious colleagues at work, exactly what you are. I'll take you to court, and I will fight for every single penny. You will not erase me. He saw the impact of his words in her eyes. This was not part of her clean, simple plan. A messy public divorce, a battle over assets, a tarnished reputation. These were complications her new life had no room for. The fear that flashed across her face was no longer about being caught. It was the fear of a predator whose prey had suddenly, unexpectedly, decided to fight back. The confrontation spilled out onto the balcony, the confines of the suite suddenly too small to contain the raw, explosive energy of their shattered marriage. The humid night air, thick with the scent of salt and diesel, did nothing to cool the fire raging between them. Sam stood with his back to the ocean, his hands gripping the polished teak railing, the knuckles white. He was a man pushed past his breaking point, his gentle nature burned away to reveal a core of unyielding pride. You will not destroy me, Veronica, he repeated, his voice low and firm, a stark contrast to the distant, cheerful music drifting up from the ship's lower decks. You won't just discard me like I was nothing. Veronica watched him, her mind a maelstrom of panic and fury. His threat had changed everything. Her meticulously crafted plan for a seamless, elegant exit had just been blown to pieces. A public divorce battle would be a disaster. Preston, for all his talk of a world without limits, despised messy complications. He valued image above all else. A scandal could jeopardize his business, his social standing, and worse, his interest in her. She could see her gilded future slipping through her fingers, all because of the man she had so casually underestimated. He was supposed to be weak, predictable. He was supposed to be heartbroken, but passive. This defiant, resolute man was a variable she had not accounted for. Don't be so dramatic, Sam, she spat, trying to regain control, to belittle him back into his box. It's just a divorce. People get them every day. This isn't just a divorce, he shot back, turning to face her, his eyes blazing in the dim light. This is a betrayal of everything we built, and I will not let you profit from it. He turned his back to her again, looking out at the vast, inky blackness of the ocean. the waves churning hypnotically below. It was a fatal mistake. As his gaze fixed on the horizon, hers darted around the small balcony, searching for, she didn't even know what, an escape? A weapon? Her eyes landed on a heavy object sitting on the small glass-top table between the lounge chairs. It was a sculpture of abstract, interlocking figures, carved from a solid block of white marble. He had given it to her on their 5th anniversary, a ridiculously sentimental gift he'd picked up from a gallery in New Orleans. He'd said it represented their 2 lives, forever intertwined. At the time, she had feigned delight. Now, she saw it only for what it was, a solid, heavy, conveniently shaped object. A cold, terrifying clarity washed over her. There was another way, a cleaner way, a permanent solution that would eliminate the complication, preserve her future, and deliver not just Preston's world, but a substantial life insurance policy as well. The thought, once formed, took root with terrifying speed. It happened in a fluid, dreamlike sequence. She took a step toward the table. Her hand, steady now, closed around the cool, smooth marble. It was heavier than she'd expected. Sam was still looking out at the sea, lost in his own world of pain and anger. He didn't hear her move. He didn't see her raise the sculpture high above her head. She brought it down with all the force of her rage, her fear, her years of simmering resentment. The sound was not a loud crack, but a sickening, muffled thud, like a melon hitting pavement. The marble connected with the back of Sam's head, just above the neck. He grunted, a short, sharp exhalation of air and surprise. His body went rigid for a second, then he staggered forward, his hands flying from the railing to his head. He stumbled against the rail, his balance compromised, a look of pure, uncomprehending shock on his face as he turned slightly toward her. "Ronnie," he slurred, his eyes wide with confusion, not yet fully processing the attack. Blood began to mat his short hair, dark and thick in the moonlight. There was no time for him to recover, no time for him to scream or fight back. Before he could regain his footing, before the shock could fully morph into terror, Veronica acted again. With a guttural cry, she dropped the sculpture and lunged forward, planting both hands flat on his chest and pushing with every ounce of strength she possessed. It was a push born of pure, desperate adrenaline. Sam, already disoriented and top-heavy from the blow, had no chance. His feet lifted from the deck. For a horrifying suspended moment, he seemed to hang in the air, his body tumbling over the railing in a clumsy, graceless arc. He didn't even have time to scream. There was only a fleeting glimpse of his face, his eyes finally registering the ultimate betrayal, and then he was gone, swallowed by the churning, indifferent darkness below. A distant splash was lost in the sound of the ship's engines and the endless rhythm of the waves. Veronica stood frozen, her chest heaving, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The distant party music seemed to mock the horrific silence on the balcony. It was done. She stared at the empty space where her husband had been standing seconds before. There was no turning back. A cold, pragmatic part of her brain took over, shoving the panic down. She looked at her hands, then at the marble sculpture on the floor. There was a smear of blood on its polished surface. She had to be quick, meticulous. She picked up the sculpture and carried it back inside, her movements now eerily calm and deliberate. She walked into the gleaming modern bathroom, turned on the tap, and began to wash the marble under the cold, running water. She had researched this. She had a small, travel-size bottle of industrial-grade cleaning solvent, purchased online and marketed for removing stubborn organic stains, tucked away in her toiletries bag. As she scrubbed away the last physical traces of her husband from the anniversary gift he had given her, she wasn't thinking about love or loss. She was thinking about her future and the price she had just paid to secure it. For the next hour, the luxurious suite became a different kind of stage. The scene of a brutal crime was meticulously transformed back into a lover's paradise. With a chilling composure, Veronica Anderson executed a cleanup operation worthy of a professional. She used the industrial solvent to scrub the marble sculpture until it gleamed under the bathroom lights, leaving no visible trace of blood. She then took a damp cloth and the same powerful chemical to the balcony floor, meticulously wiping the spot where Sam had fallen, then the railing where his hands had gripped. She worked with an unnerving focus, her mind a cold, clear machine processing a checklist. Wipe the sculpture, clean the floor, check the railing, dispose of the cloths. She bundled the used washcloths into a small plastic bag, which she then buried at the very bottom of the trash can under a pile of tissues and empty cosmetic containers. She checked her appearance in the full-length mirror. Her dress was clean. Her hands were clean. Not a single drop of blood had touched her. To any observer, she was simply a woman returning from an elegant dinner. The only sign of the violent cataclysm that had just occurred was in her eyes, a haunted, feral glint that she quickly masked with a practiced expression of weary concern. The final touch was the most crucial. She had to create a reason for Sam to have been on the balcony alone. She took his half-finished glass of bourbon from the nightstand and placed it on the small table outside, next to an open book he'd been reading. The scene was now set. A husband, unable to sleep after a minor spat, steps out onto his private balcony for a nightcap and some fresh air. Plausible, tragic, accidental. With the stage set, she began the countdown. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, and watched the numbers on the digital clock flip by. She had to wait. Rushing to sound the alarm too soon would seem suspicious, as if she knew something had happened. Waiting too long might also raise questions. She decided on 90 minutes, enough time for a man to fall, for the ship to move miles away from the spot, and for any hope of rescue to be extinguished. For 90 agonizing minutes, she sat in perfect silence, rehearsing. She practiced the tremor in her voice, the frantic edge of panic. She thought about real tears, how to summon them, how to make the grief look not just real, but overwhelming. At precisely 1:47 a.m., she was ready. She took a deep breath, mussed her perfect hair into a state of frantic disarray, and burst from her cabin door into the hushed, carpeted hallway. "Help!" she screamed, her voice a perfect symphony of terror and desperation. "Somebody please help me! My husband, he's gone!" A couple from the suite next door poked their heads out, their faces alarmed. A passing night shift steward rushed to her side. "Ma'am, what's wrong? What happened?" the young man asked, his eyes wide. "My husband, Samuel," Veronica sobbed, clinging to his arm. "We had a small argument after dinner. It was nothing, really, just silly. He said he was going out to the balcony for some air. I fell asleep. I just woke up, and he's not here. The balcony door was wide open. He's gone." The performance was flawless. Her body shook with convulsive sobs. Her words were a jumble of panic and self-recrimination. Within minutes, the hallway was buzzing. Ship security was called, their calm, professional demeanor a stark contrast to Veronica's theatrical hysteria. She led them back to the suite, pointing with a trembling finger to the open balcony door, the half-empty glass of bourbon, the open book. He must have leaned too far," she wailed, collapsing into a chair. "Oh God, Sam, he can't swim that well." The security officers exchanged a grave look. A man overboard was the ultimate nightmare scenario on a cruise ship. The ship's first officer arrived, a stern man with kind eyes, who tried to comfort the hysterical wife. He asked questions, and Veronica answered them between ragged breaths. "Had he been drinking heavily, Mrs. Anderson?" No, just that one glass," she cried. "He never drank much." "Was he depressed? Did he have any reason to harm himself?" the officer asked gently. This was the moment she had rehearsed. She looked up, her eyes flooded with tears that now flowed effortlessly. Harm himself? No, never. Sam loved life. She paused, letting a new terrible thought seemingly dawn on her. But he had been a little down lately, stressed about work, about money. Oh God, maybe I didn't see it. Maybe I wasn't paying attention. Maybe I didn't realize how much pain he was in. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. She had not only provided a plausible scenario for an accident, but had now expertly planted the seed of an alternative, suicide. It was a masterful touch, casting her not as a potential suspect, but as a tragically oblivious, guilt-ridden widow. The ship's horn blared, a mournful, deafening sound that echoed across the dark water. The captain had been notified. Searchlights began to sweep across the waves. The ship slowed, a futile gesture. The U.S. Coast Guard was being contacted. As crew members spoke in hushed, urgent tones on their radios and passengers began to gather in the corridors, drawn by the commotion, Veronica Anderson sat in the heart of the storm she had created, playing the role of a lifetime. She was no longer just Veronica Anderson, ambitious director. She was the grieving widow of the MS Caribbean dream, a figure of pure, unassailable tragedy. The body of Samuel Anderson was discovered at dawn by a charter boat captain setting out for a day of marlin fishing. It was snagged on a mangrove root in the shallow turquoise waters off Key Largo, miles from the deep channel where the cruise ships passed. The discovery turned the idyllic Florida morning into a scene of grim, procedural reality. By the time Detective Kira Grant of the Monroe County Sheriff's Office arrived, the area was cordoned off with yellow tape, a stark, ugly gash against the natural beauty of the Keys. Kira Grant was not a typical Keys detective. A transplant from the gritty streets of Philadelphia, she had a sharp, analytical mind that saw past the sunshine and surf to the darkness that could fester anywhere. She was a black woman in a department that was predominantly white and male, and she'd earned her rank not with pleasantries, but with a relentless, near-perfect closure rate. She took in the scene with a practiced, dispassionate eye, the body bag on the sand, the somber medical examiner, the deputies keeping curious onlookers at bay. "What have we got, Doc?" she asked the ME, a weary veteran named Al. Male, African-American, mid-30s. ID in his wallet says Samuel Anderson from Atlanta. "Preliminary cause of death is drowning," Al said, peeling off his gloves. "But there's this." He gestured toward the victim's head. "Significant blunt force trauma to the occipital region. Could be from hitting the hull on the way down. Could be from hitting a rock when he washed ashore. Could be something else entirely." "Something else entirely," Kira repeated softly. That was the phrase that always snagged her attention. "What's your gut tell you?" "My gut tells me the water's been calm the last 24 hours. A fall from a cruise ship is possible, but this kind of specific head wound, it's a little too neat for a chaotic fall." A uniformed deputy, a young, eager officer named Miller, approached them. "Detective, the Coast Guard just confirmed. A Samuel Anderson was reported missing from the Caribbean Dream overnight. His wife reported it. They're bringing her to shore now. She's apparently devastated." Kira nodded. "All right, get the body to the lab. I want a full tox screen, water samples from the lungs, and a detailed analysis of that head wound. I want to know if it happened before or after he hit the water." An hour later, Kira watched as a Coast Guard cutter docked. A woman, impeccably dressed in black linen trousers and a silk blouse that looked expensive even when wrinkled, was escorted onto the pier. This was Veronica Anderson. She was flanked by cruise line officials, her face a mask of tragic beauty. Her sobs were quiet, dignified. She looked every bit the shattered widow. Kira approached, introducing herself and offering condolences. "Mrs. Anderson, I know this is an impossibly difficult time," Kira began, her voice gentle but firm. "But I need to ask you a few questions." They sat in a sterile, air-conditioned interview room at the small Key Largo substation. Veronica recounted the story Kira had already heard from the ship's initial report. The minor argument, Sam's desire for fresh air on the balcony, her falling asleep, and the horrible discovery. Her performance was impeccable. The tears seemed genuine. Her voice broke at all the right moments. "It must have been an accident," Veronica whispered, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "He must have slipped." "Your husband's body was found with a significant head injury, Mrs. Anderson," Kira stated, watching for a reaction. Veronica's eyes widened. "Oh, God, he must have hit the side of the ship when he fell. That's horrible." Her response was quick, logical, and devoid of any hesitation. Too quick. Kira decided to probe. "Did your husband have any enemies? Anyone who might wish him harm?" "Enemies? Sam?" Veronica let out a watery, incredulous laugh. "Everyone loved Sam. He was a school teacher. He didn't have a mean bone in his body." Back in the squad room, Kira reviewed her notes. Deputy Miller leaned against the doorframe. "Probably just what it looks like, Detective. A tragic accident. Or maybe—" He trailed off, lowering his voice. "You know, guy from Atlanta? Maybe some trouble from back home followed him here. Gang-related, maybe?" The casual racism of the comment, the easy leap to a tired stereotype, made Kira's jaw tighten. She'd heard variations of it her whole career. She turned and gave Miller a look so cold it could have frozen the humid Florida air. "No, Miller," she said, her voice dangerously level. "It's not gang-related. Get me a preliminary background check on both of them. Finances, phone records, work history, everything. And find out who he was close to. Best friend, family, someone who knew him better than the woman who just told me her husband must have slipped. Miller, chastened, scurried off. Kira turned back to the whiteboard where she'd written Samuel Anderson. Underneath it, she wrote homicide with a heavy black marker and circled it. Everyone else saw a grieving widow, a tragic accident, a sad case of suicide. But Kira Grant saw a performance, and her instincts, honed by years of seeing through lies, were screaming that something was terribly, fundamentally wrong with the beautiful, heartbroken woman in black. The head wound, the wife's rehearsed grief, the subtle clues. It all pointed to something else entirely, and Kira was determined to find out what. Detective Kira Grant believed that the dead leave behind echoes, and it was a detective's job to learn how to listen to them. Samuel Anderson's echo was found in his cell phone records. While the device itself was lost to the Atlantic, the call logs obtained from the service provider told a story. In the final hours of his life, between 9 p.m. and 9:45 p.m. on the night he disappeared, Sam had made 5 frantic calls. All were to the same number, a number belonging to a man in Atlanta named Andre Clark. When Kira first called him, Andre was guarded, his voice thick with grief and suspicion. He was a black man in Atlanta, and a call from a police department in Florida about his best friend's death immediately put him on the defensive. He gave clipped, non-committal answers. Yes, Sam was my best friend, since college. No, I can't imagine why he would fall off a ship. He was a strong swimmer. Kira sensed his distrust. It was a familiar wall she often had to scale. Mr. Clark, she said, shifting her tone from official to personal. My name is Detective Kira Grant. I'm the lead on this case. I'm not calling to check a box. I'm calling because the official story, that your friend, a healthy man, just accidentally fell off a cruise ship, isn't adding up for me. His call log shows that you were the last person he spoke to. He called you 5 times. He was desperate to reach you. I believe you know something that can help me find the truth of what happened to him. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Kira could hear Andre take a deep, shaky breath. The truth, he finally said, his voice cracking. The truth is, that woman killed him. The dam broke. For the next hour, Andre Clark poured out a story of love, ambition, and betrayal that painted a picture of Veronica Anderson that was vastly different from the grieving widow. He and Sam had been like brothers since they were freshmen at Morehouse College. He was the best man at their wedding, and for the past year, he had watched with a growing sense of dread as Veronica changed. It was like a switch flipped in her, Andre said, his voice raw with anger. She got that big promotion, and suddenly our world wasn't good enough for her. Sam was a rock, you know, the most decent, grounded man I've ever known. He was proud of his work, of the kids he taught. But she started to see him as an obstacle, an anchor holding her back. Andre explained Sam's growing suspicions. The late nights Veronica claimed were work, the constant secretive texting, the new expensive clothes she'd dismiss as company perks. He didn't want to believe it, Andre continued. He loved her so much, he kept making excuses for her. He thought he was being paranoid. And then he called me from the ship. Kira listened, pen flying across her notepad. This was it, the missing piece. He called you from a bar on the lower deck, Andre recounted, his voice catching. He sounded broken. He said he'd found it, proof. He'd seen her phone, messages, pictures, the whole 9 yards. She was having an affair, a serious one, planning to leave him right after the cruise. Did he say who it was with? Kira pressed. Yeah, he did, Andre said, the name dripping with contempt. A guy named Preston Davenport, some rich white shoe investment broker in Buckhead she'd met through work, the kind of guy she always used to read about in magazines. Sam said he was going back to the cabin to confront her. I told him to be careful. I told him to wait, to talk to her in the morning, in a public place. But he wouldn't listen. He said he had to face her, man to man, husband to wife. Andre's voice dropped to a whisper. The last thing he said to me was, "She's not getting away with this, Dre. I'm not going to let her and her lover laugh at me. I'm going to fight." And then the line went dead. I tried calling back, but he never picked up. A heavy silence filled the space between Atlanta and Key Largo. Andre had just provided the three things every homicide detective needs: motive, opportunity, and a timeline. The minor argument Veronica had described was, in fact, a marriage-ending confrontation over infidelity. Sam hadn't gone to the balcony for fresh air. He had gone to fight for his life and his dignity. "Mr. Clark, this is incredibly important," Kira said, her voice steady and reassuring. "You've given him a voice. Now I need one more thing. Do you know anything else about this Preston Davenport?" "Only what Sam said, that he was her ticket to a different life, a life she thought she was entitled to," Andre said bitterly. "She always thought she was too good for us, detective. Too good for a world where people love each other for who they are, not for what they have. Sam was the best of us, and she threw him away for a fantasy." After hanging up, Kira stood before her whiteboard. She erased the question mark after homicide and underlined the word twice. She now had a narrative, a powerful, damning story from the victim's own best friend. She had the name of the third party, the missing piece of the puzzle. The case was no longer about a man who fell. It was about a man who was pushed. The echoes of Samuel Anderson were getting louder, and they were all screaming his wife's name. Kira picked up her phone and made a call to her counterpart in the Atlanta PD's Financial Crimes Unit. It was time to learn everything there was to know about Mr. Preston Davenport. 2 days of meticulous forensic work on the cruise ship cabin had yielded absolutely nothing. The suite, sealed by the cruise line at Kira's request, was pristine. The forensics team from Miami-Dade, armed with the latest technology, had come up empty. They sprayed the carpets, the furniture, and the balcony with luminol, a chemical that reacts with the iron in hemoglobin to reveal the presence of blood, even in trace amounts. But the room remained dark. Not a single telltale blue-green glow appeared. The powerful industrial solvent Veronica had used had done its job perfectly. It had not just cleaned the blood, it had chemically broken it down, rendering the standard forensic tests useless. "It's a dead end, Kira," the lead forensic tech told her over the phone. "The place is cleaner than a hospital operating room. If there was a struggle in there, the perpetrator knew exactly what they were doing. We've got nothing." The Monroe County Sheriff, a politician at heart, was getting antsy. The cruise line was pressuring him to release the cabin. The press was running stories about a tragic accident at sea. The official narrative was hardening like cement, and Kira felt her case slipping away. She had a powerful motive from Andre Clark, but no physical evidence to connect Veronica to the crime. Without it, her suspicions were just that, suspicions. A good defense attorney would tear her case apart. That night, Kira sat in her small, cluttered office, staring at the crime scene photos. The suite looked perfect, too perfect. The gleaming bathroom, the spotless carpet, the neatly arranged furniture. It was this very perfection that bothered her. Crime is messy. Passion is messy. A violent confrontation that ends in murder should leave a mark, a scar, some tiny overlooked remnant of the chaos. This room had no scars. It had been sanitized, its memory erased. An idea began to form, a long shot born of frustration and a stubborn refusal to accept defeat. She remembered a specialized K-9 unit she had worked with on a cold case back in Philadelphia, a dog trained not just for drugs or explosives, but for detecting the faint, residual scent of human decomposition and blood, even after extensive cleaning. It was unconventional, a tool rarely used in a clean scene like this. But Kira was running out of conventional options. The next morning, she made the call. It took some convincing, pulling a few strings and calling in a favor. But by that afternoon, a black sheriff's SUV pulled up to the port where the Caribbean Dream was docked. Out of the back jumped a magnificent German shepherd with intelligent, watchful eyes. His name was Shadow, and his handler, a quiet, intense man named Sergeant Davis, assured Kira, "If something happened in that room, he'll find it." The team returned to the sealed suite. The cruise line officials watched with skepticism as the dog was brought on board. Kira led Davis and Shadow into the cabin. "Okay, boy, such," Davis commanded in German. "Find it." Shadow began to work. He moved with a quiet, intense focus, his nose twitching, taking in every scent in the room. He swept the living area, the bedroom, the bathroom, ignoring the faint smells of perfume and hotel cleaning supplies. He seemed to find nothing. The forensic tech who had accompanied them shot Kira a look that said, "I told you so." Kira's heart sank. Maybe she had been wrong. But then, as Shadow approached the area near the balcony door, his demeanor changed. His tail, which had been relaxed, stiffened. His ears perked up. He began to whine softly, circling a specific spot on the plush, cream-colored carpet. The very spot that had stubbornly refused to glow under the luminol. He sniffed it intently, then looked up at Davis and let out a single, sharp bark. Then he did something that made the hair on Kira's arms stand up. He lay down on the spot, a trained signal for a positive alert. "Good boy," Davis said softly, rewarding him with a treat. "He's got something right there." Kira felt a surge of adrenaline. "What else, Shadow?" Davis gave another command, and the dog immediately got up and continued his search. He moved onto the balcony, sniffing the railing and the floor, before returning inside. He went directly to the small table beside the armchair. On it sat the white marble sculpture, which had been catalogued as evidence but deemed insignificant. Shadow sniffed at the base of the sculpture, his nose working furiously. Then he began to bark, a loud, insistent, unwavering bark, his eyes fixed on the anniversary gift. He wouldn't stop. He pawed at the table, his message clear and undeniable. The skeptical forensic tech was now staring, his mouth slightly agape. "Bag it!" Kira commanded, her voice ringing with newfound authority. "Bag that sculpture and get it to the lab. I don't care what your previous tests showed. Tell them to use mass spectrometry. Tell them to look for iron particulates, anything. Take up this entire section of the carpet and the padding underneath. That dog just found my physical evidence." As she walked out of the cabin, Kira gave Shadow a long, grateful scratch behind the ears. The dog had done what millions of dollars of forensic technology could not. He had smelled the lie. He had found the faint, lingering ghost of Samuel Anderson's blood, a ghost that Veronica, for all her meticulous planning, had failed to completely exorcise. The pristine, perfect crime scene was a crime scene once more. The flight to Atlanta was fueled by a fresh wave of momentum. The lab had confirmed Shadow's findings. Using advanced spectrometry, they had discovered microscopic iron particulates, the last remnants of hemoglobin, deep within the fibers of the carpet padding, and, crucially, embedded in the porous micro-fissures of the white marble sculpture. It was the physical evidence Kira needed, the undeniable link between the violence in the cabin and the weapon used. Now, it was time to confront the man in the shadows, Preston Davenport. Preston's office was the physical embodiment of his persona, a top-floor suite in a gleaming Buckhead skyscraper, all glass, steel, and minimalist art that cost more than Kira's house. The air was cool and smelled faintly of expensive leather and smug entitlement. He kept her waiting for 15 minutes, a classic power play, before finally receiving her. He was exactly as Andre Clark had described him, tall, impeccably tailored, with a politician's smile that never reached his cold, calculating eyes. "Detective Grant," he said, gesturing to a chair that felt intentionally smaller and lower than his own. "My receptionist said this was about an accidental death, a tragic business, but I'm not sure how it concerns me. I'm a very busy man." Kira ignored the condescension. She sat down and met his gaze, her own expression unreadable. "It concerns you, Mr. Davenport, because the man who died was Samuel Anderson, and his wife, Veronica, was your lover." Not a muscle flinched in Preston's face. He was good. He let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Detective, I meet hundreds of people through my work. I may have met Mrs. Anderson at a corporate function. To suggest anything more is slanderous. I hope you have more than just gossip to go on. I have phone records, a year's worth of text messages, plans for a future together after she was free," Kira said, her voice flat and even. "I have a witness who heard Samuel Anderson say your name on the night he died. And I have forensic evidence that proves he was murdered in his cabin." For the first time, a flicker of something, annoyance, perhaps a sliver of fear, crossed his face. But he recovered quickly. "This is absurd. If you're going to make these kinds of wild accusations, I'll have to insist you do so in the presence of my attorney." "Oh, we'll get to the attorneys," Kira said, leaning forward slightly. But we're not just investigating a murder anymore, Mr. Davenport. She paused, letting the silence hang in the air. This was the moment. She was bluffing, but it was a calculated, educated bluff based on a file she'd received from her contact in the Atlanta PD's Financial Crimes Unit that morning. A file detailing a number of irregularities in Preston's investment firm. "We've been contacted by another agency," Kira continued, her voice dropping conspiratorially. "The SEC. It seems they've been looking into your firm's creative accounting practices for some time now. Ponzi schemes, wire fraud, those are the terms they were using. It appears your entire empire, Mr. Davenport, is a house of cards about to collapse." The effect was instantaneous and profound. The mask of arrogant indifference shattered. The blood drained from Preston's face, leaving behind a pasty gray pallor. His carefully constructed world of wealth and power was a sham, and he knew that Kira knew it. The murder of a school teacher was one thing. A federal investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission was another. That was a threat he understood. That was a threat that could send him to a place where his money and influence meant nothing. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, but the denial was weak, pathetic. He was no longer a predator toying with his prey. He was a cornered animal. Kira stood up, her point made. "We also have reason to believe that Samuel Anderson's life insurance policy, a new, very large policy taken out by his wife 2 months ago, was going to be the solution to your financial problems. A convenient infusion of cash to keep your scheme afloat." She walked to the door, then turned. "You're right. You do need an attorney, Mr. Davenport. A very, very good one. Because right now, you're looking at conspiracy to commit murder on top of a mountain of federal fraud charges. The U.S. Attorney's Office tends to be very interested in suspects who are willing to cooperate in a high-profile murder investigation. Think about what you have to offer." She left him there, standing in his glass castle, the foundations crumbling around him. She hadn't just rattled him. She had given him an exit strategy, a path to self-preservation. She knew that a man like Preston Davenport, a man who valued himself above all else, would always choose the path that saved his own skin. It was only a matter of time before he turned on his partner in crime. The empire was falling, and Kira was certain he would try to drag Veronica down with him to cushion his own landing. The trap was set. Kira Grant knew that to break a sociopath, you couldn't appeal to their conscience, because they didn't have one. You had to appeal to their self-interest and shatter their sense of control. She flew back to Atlanta, but she didn't call Veronica's lawyer. Instead, armed with a search warrant, she went directly to the Anderson home. She wanted to face Veronica on her own turf, in the house she had shared with the man she'd murdered, surrounded by the ghosts of a life she had systematically destroyed. Veronica opened the door, dressed in stylish morning clothes. When she saw Kira, her face hardened into a mask of indignation. "Detective, my lawyer has explicitly instructed me not to speak with you without him present. You're harassing me." "I'm not here to talk, Mrs. Anderson. I'm here to search," Kira said, holding up the warrant. "Under suspicion of the murder of your husband, Samuel Anderson." As 2 local officers began a methodical search of the house, Kira invited Veronica to sit at the dining room table. On its polished surface, she laid out her evidence like a surgeon arranging her instruments. She started with the crime scene photos of the cabin, then the forensic reports detailing the microscopic blood evidence found on the carpet and, most damningly, on the marble sculpture. "My dog Shadow has a very good nose," Kira said conversationally. "He found what your chemicals couldn't hide." Veronica's composure began to fray at the edges, but she held firm. "That's circumstantial. Sam could have cut himself shaving. It proves nothing." Next, Kira produced the transcripts of Andre Clark's testimony, his heartbreaking account of Sam's final, desperate phone call. "A disgruntled friend with a grudge," Veronica sniffed, her voice tight. "He never liked me." Kira kept her own expression neutral, her voice calm. She was building a cage of facts around Veronica, bar by inescapable bar. She presented the phone records, the texts with Preston, the evidence of their year-long affair. "A mistake," Veronica said, her knuckles white as she gripped the table's edge. "A terrible mistake, but it doesn't make me a killer." She was resilient. Kira had to give her that. She was sticking to her story, stonewalling with the icy resolve of a true narcissist. It was time for the final move. Kira leaned back in her chair, adopting a look of almost sympathetic resignation. "You know, you're probably right," Kira said, her change in tone catching Veronica off guard. "It's a lot of circumstantial evidence. A good lawyer might be able to create reasonable doubt, but it doesn't matter anymore." "What are you talking about?" Veronica asked, suspicion lacing her voice. Kira sighed, as if sharing a disappointing secret. "I spent yesterday with Preston. At first, he was just like you. Denials, threats of lawyers, but his situation is complicated. The feds are closing in on him. His business is a house of cards. He's looking at 20 years for fraud alone." Kira let that sink in before delivering the coup de grace, a masterful, calculated lie. "He's made a deal, Veronica," she said softly. "A full cooperation agreement in exchange for a reduced sentence. He's given us a signed, sworn statement. He told us everything." Veronica stared at her, her eyes wide with disbelief. What? "He said it was your idea from the beginning," Kira continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "He said you were the one who was desperate. You were terrified Sam's messy divorce would expose your affair and ruin your career. He claims you manipulated him, telling him that Sam's life insurance, the policy you took out, would be the perfect way to solve his financial troubles and set you both up for life. He even said you were the one who insisted on the cruise, calling it the perfect place for an accident." Kira watched as a decade of carefully constructed self-control disintegrated before her eyes. Veronica's world was built on the belief that she was the smartest person in any room, that men like Preston were tools for her advancement. The idea that he, her partner, her ticket to a better life, had so easily and completely betrayed her to save himself was an insult her ego could not withstand. The foundation of her reality crumbled. "He's lying," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I know it's hard to hear," Kira said gently, "but his testimony, combined with our evidence, he'll probably get 7 to 10 years for his part. You, on the other hand, will be facing the death penalty. He saved himself, Veronica. He left you to take the fall. That was the key that unlocked the rage." Veronica's face contorted, the mask of the grieving widow replaced by the face of a furious, cornered animal. "That bastard is lying!" she shrieked, slamming her fist on the table, the sound echoing through the quiet house. She shot to her feet, her eyes blazing with a hate so pure it was terrifying. "It was his idea! His! He was the one who said a divorce would take too long. He was the one who whined about his debts day and night. He said it was the only way. He told me to get the bigger insurance policy. He called the cruise a clean slate. He planned it. I just did it." She stopped abruptly, her own words hanging in the air like a death sentence. The frantic, desperate confession, spewed in a torrent of rage and betrayal, had sealed her fate. She slowly sank back into her chair, the fury draining away, replaced by the hollow, empty realization of what she had just done. The room was silent, save for the sound of her own ragged breathing. Kira Grant leaned forward and switched off the small, concealed digital recorder she had placed on the table. "Thank you, Veronica," she said, her voice once again cool and professional. "That's all I needed?" The trial of Veronica Anderson and Preston Davenport was a media sensation in Atlanta, dubbed the Caribbean Widow Case, by a press corps hungry for a story of glamour, greed, and cold-blooded murder. The courtroom became a theater of betrayal. Faced with Veronica's taped confession, Preston's lawyers had no choice but to have him testify against her, painting her as a manipulative Lady Macbeth who had seduced him into her wicked plot. In turn, Veronica's defense portrayed Preston as a desperate con man who had preyed on a vulnerable woman, pushing her to commit an unspeakable act to save his failing business. They were two vipers in a pit, each trying to strike the other to save themselves. But the evidence methodically presented by the prosecution team, with Detective Kira Grant as their star witness, was overwhelming. The forensic findings from Shadow the K-9, Andre Clark's powerful testimony about his friend's last hours, the financial records, the insurance policies, and, of course, their own damning words, created an irrefutable narrative of a meticulously planned murder for profit. The jury took less than 4 hours to find them both guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy. The judge, citing the extreme cruelty and shocking lack of remorse exhibited by both defendants, sentenced them to life in prison without the possibility of parole. They were sent to separate maximum security facilities, and within a year, any contact between them had ceased. Their unholy alliance dissolved into bitter, separate silences. But justice is a broader concept than a prison sentence. The story of Sam Anderson didn't end in that courtroom. His legacy, the quiet, powerful echo of his life, began to resonate in the community he had loved. The high school where he had taught, with a large donation spearheaded by a guilt-ridden school board and a passionate Andre Clark, established the Samuel Anderson Legacy Scholarship. Each year, it would provide a full-ride college scholarship to a promising student of color from a low-income background, the very kind of student Sam had championed and mentored every day of his career. Andre, now a board member of the fund, made it his mission to ensure his friend's passion for education lived on. The house that Sam and Veronica had shared was sold, and by court order, the proceeds were donated to a local children's hospice where Sam had quietly volunteered every other weekend. His former students raised money to dedicate a memorial bench in the park where he used to hold extra tutoring sessions on sunny afternoons. It was inscribed with his favorite quote from James Baldwin: "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." Back in Key Largo, Kira Grant closed the thick file on case number Aspen 34. A picture of Samuel Anderson, a smiling, handsome man in a graduation gown, stood propped on her desk. It was a reminder that behind every case file number was a human life, a story that deserved to be told, a person who deserved to be fought for. The case had left its mark on her. It was a stark lesson in the corrosive nature of ambition when untethered from morality. Veronica had not started out a monster. She had been a woman with legitimate grievances against a world that often undervalued her. But in her desperate climb to escape the cage of racial and social prejudice, she had built a gilded one of her own, one that demanded the ultimate sacrifice, her humanity and Sam's life. The truest measure of a person's worth, Kira reflected, wasn't found in their bank account or their job title, but in the love they gave and the lives they touched. By that measure, Samuel Anderson, the humble schoolteacher, had been the wealthiest man she had ever known. His life was not a dead end, as Veronica had so cruelly called it. It was a wellspring of goodness that continued to nourish others even after he was gone. Justice had been served, but the real victory was in the quiet, enduring legacy of a good man.